In the United States, a country that has moved beyond the trauma of interracial relations, dominating it for so very long. And I would say, as a final example, even in France, the very model of national indivisibility, affirmative action, although under different names, the French will never adopt the name that we use here, affirmative action under different names has been creeping in France today. And we can talk about it later on as well. Now, what does all of it mean to Israel, just to end up? I think three different things that I want to emphasize. First of all, every country has to find its own way toward accommodation. There is no, we would argue, no one-size-fits-all in the politics of ethnic relations. Ethnic relations are always very complicated. This is the case in Pakistan, certainly in India, all over Europe. You never have a solution that is good for everyone. Second point, Israel does not fit well a full-fledged power-sharing or even a federalist structure. But it has a tradition and structure that allows autonomy in some areas, more extensive recognition of the minority, and a liberal democracy in terms of all individual protections. Thirdly, if Israel decides not to pursue the kind of program we have offered here, if it sanctifies the status quo and pushes further the exclusivity of the majority, it will court, we argue, in the short run, significant deterioration in majority-minority relations, and in the long run, a possible disaster. So, this book has to be read, I will finally say, as Dov also used the same metaphor, as sounding of the alarm by two people who are deeply worried about the future of the country, an Israeli-Palestinian genuine reconciliation, and therefore very comprehensive one, a comprehensive regional peace, and in the final analysis, a justice for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dov. Thank you. Ilan, why don't you both stay here at the podium and we'll take questions. Thank you for those insights. Very discouraging, but very interesting set of possible steps to take. Of course, you know, it's sad to think that Arab-Israeli relations have simply gotten worse over the decades and not better. You talk a lot about the importance of protecting Arab rights through legal means, anti-discrimination laws. I'm just wondering if more can be done to change present sort of Jewish attitudes toward Arabs. There's this very anti-Arab view with people like Avigdor Lieberman in power. What can be done in that arena, or do we simply have to rely on kind of giving Arabs more legal rights?
Well, I think one area in which these attitudes are most worrying is in the younger generation, actually. Younger Israeli Jews are actually less tolerant, have less democratic values than do older Israeli Jews. So I think the school system is critical here. Now, it's important to remember that the Israeli school system is essentially a segregated one where there is a separate Arabic educational stream that exists separate from the Jewish educational stream, which is itself also subdivided. But I think in terms of focusing within the educational system in particular to bring in Arab teachers into Israeli schools, to promote the learning of Arabic within Israeli schools, to have civics classes within Israeli schools, all of these things, because I think the young generation are particularly worrying in terms of their attitudes. And then also within the broader Israeli culture, when you have parliamentary debates in which, overtly racist attitudes are expressed, then it is very important for the society, for the media, and for other Israeli politicians and political leaders to speak out very strongly against those kinds of expressions.
Yeah, and I will add to that it's not only the separation between Arabs and Jews. Yeah, not only the separation between Arabs and Jews, but there is also a cultural war, a Kulturkampf, in effect, going on within the Jewish community that has been intensified since 1967. In other words, you can go to schools in Tel Aviv, for example, my hometown, where you will find liberal attitudes expressed by teachers and so on and so forth. You may go to other schools very often associated with religious circles in Israel that tends to be much more nationalistic. So Israel actually has 6 or 7 different systems, not only a Jewish system, which is a sort of the overall system, and the Arab system, but also religious systems and several versions thereof, and so on and so forth. So this is basically a struggle that I think has to be understood against the background of a much larger debate as to the nature of the Israeli Zionist entity. It's not only an Arab-Jewish relations, it's also the nature of the society at large.
Great. Let's open the floor to questions. I believe, Art, did you have your hand up? Hold on one second. We'll get you the microphone.
All right, thanks very much. Do you suggest any ways to deal with the question of IDF service by the minority? Because we know IDF service is so important in building the relationship of the individual to society as a whole, and there are all kinds of economic advantages too, subsidized mortgages and all kinds of other things for IDF service.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. The IDF has always been, from the Ben Gurion era, a sort of an institution for the identification with the state. The decision at the time was, and still is fundamentally, that Arabs could be recruited to the military, but the Minister of Defense decides not to do so, generally speaking. And, they also do not call into service religious Jews, women, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, our approach in the book is not to demand Arabs to serve in the military, but to afford a service in communal organizations, civic programs, and so on and so forth, and do all of it on a voluntary basis. The Israeli government about 3 or 4 years ago has started a program of that nature. You have now several thousands of people participating in it. So those are the kinds of institutions that for us are seeking the very, very difficult middle ground. I don't think that, giving Arabs weapons and sending to fight against the Syrians in the Golan Heights or the Hezbollah is a way to go. I think that you have to take into account the very complicated uneasy relationships and the family relationships, of course, that cut across between especially the West Bank and Israel. So that's not the way to do it. And the Arab leadership, by the way, is extremely, extremely sensitive and opposed to it. But if you have a voluntary program in which Arabs serve, and if they want to serve, they can serve in their own communities, I think it will be one way of moving the ball forward. Just
to add to that, I think I just want to make 2 quick points. First of all, it's important to recognize that the rights that the Palestinian minority have in Israel should not be dependent upon service. Just as we don't extend in any democratic state the extension of individual or collective rights, the Palestinian minority, it's important to bear in mind, is an indigenous minority. And therefore, the rights that they have within Israel should not be linked in any way to their service to the state. That said, we do think, as Ilan just described, that civilian service of a voluntary nature would be helpful. But it's important to emphasize that there should not be some sort of quid pro quo, whereby in order to get certain rights, you therefore have to do service. The other thing I just want to point out, the community that does do obligatory military service in Israel, the Druze minority, as well as some Bedouin who do serve, they don't fare much better than the rest of the Palestinian community in Israel who don't serve. So sometimes in Israel it's said, well, the reason why they're worse off, or the reason why, is because they don't perform military service. Well, as I said, the fact of the experience of the Bedouin and the Druze suggests otherwise, suggests that it's not that their inferior status in Israel cannot simply be attributed to the fact that they don't perform military service.